We meet again. How you doing?
Doing good. Doing good. Yeah, happy to be here.
Glad you're here. Yeah, I think last time we saw each other was in freezing Nashville of all places.
Yeah. Was it cold? Or maybe it was like about to be about to be the ice storm.
Yes,
Yeah, I think
yeah, storm of
we
the
ate
century or something.
yeah, we ate Spanish food, and then I think I flew out of town the next day to get to New York to record some other podcasts because I was worried justifiably about my flight being canceled. My original flight did get canceled, so it was a good thing I got to New York ahead of time. They just
Yeah,
got like, I don't know, they just got like 2 feet of snow in New York, so it was, for them it was no big deal, but for here it was like half inch of ice or an inch of ice on all the trees, and so like all the dead branches and trees fell down and caused havoc all over town. So
that was the storm for sure. Well, glad you made it out of it. And yeah, what have you been up to? It seems like you've hit a new stride. It's like Wes the Renaissance man all of a sudden. Just
yeah, I've been grinding. I mean, to be honest with you, like I spent a lot of I was pretty tuned out of AI throughout 2023 and 2024. Like I remember when ChatGPT launched, like I actually muted LLMs in my Twitter timeline. I was like, I'm just not interested in this. So I was just not tuned in at all. And then it in the beginning of last year, it I spent like the first couple months of the year in a state of like existential dread, I would say, about like what is my purpose? Like what do I even do here anymore? Basically, like contemplating the future of software engineering and development as a, journeyman programmer, somebody who's been working for 20 years, been I've built a lot of projects and founded a bunch of companies and have been just building software. And so uh, didn't really use like the AI IDEs very much. I never paid for Cursor. Like I tried out Windsurf for a couple of months. I was like, it's like a little bit better than Copilot in VS Code. But then I saw Steve Yegge posting about Claude Code, I think last April, and started going down the coding agent rabbit hole. And obviously last April with, I think it was Sonnet 4 at the time, like it just wasn't that good. And I started using Claude Code in a limited way to do positron development. So positron is a data science IDE, a multi-language data science IDE that Posit develops, Posit where I work. And I started having some success using Claude Code with positron, and that was pretty exciting. I was like, wow, okay, I could see a future where I just do development with this thing and I don't write any code anymore. And so I started really leaning into that, like, I started leaning into that like not writing code thing. I was like, let's just see how this works.
yeah,
So obviously that went on for 4 or 5 months, and it was clear, like, especially with Opus 4.5, that the models had crossed a chasm and gotten significantly better, where you could trust them not to like do everything. Like they still needed a lot of supervision and guardrails, but they could tackle much more difficult tasks. And like the difference between Sonnet 4 and Opus 4.5 was like so significant, where it's like, okay, like I can use this to build real software that I use, as opposed to like working on little toy features that require like some amount of agentic development and then like a bunch of
right.
manual fixes and tweaks and stuff. And then I also got busy. Like I still like remained pretty involved with Voltron Data up until the end. So like the company went through some restructuring, and was in a stage of like working through its next steps, and ultimately they decided to wind the company down at the end of the year, and the rest of the team was laid off. But I was pretty involved in there at the end, like helping find a path forward for the
That's
company and
cool.
for the team. And so back in like August, September, like I just didn't really have that much bandwidth for development. But by the end of October, it was clear that like the work that I was doing with Voltron was winding down, and I was obviously still had a full-time job at Posit. And so I started contemplating, like, okay, like seems like this AI development thing is real, coding agents are real, like what do I want to build with this? And so I started basically reevaluating my whole, call it like personal productivity stack, like how I do life basically. And so that started with personal finance, and then started dipping into like how I do software development and how I manage my personal information and my email and all my documents. And I just have started building like a whole bunch of different tools for both like managing my development process because I want to be able to build software with agents like faster and more confidently. And it turns out that like just doing like raw Claude code is like not very good. Like the code that it generates is still kind of hot garbage, I would say.
Yeah.
Like even Opus 4.6, like if you're just committing and shipping the code that's coming out of Opus 4.6, like that code is a bunch of hot garbage. Like it has to be like really rigorously reviewed by other agents and like different agent sessions to have like any semblance of confidence that you're shipping something that isn't totally slop. So like I could see like, okay, what happens if I start, having 3 or 4 agents like look at every line of code that Claude is generating and then find all the bugs and like find all the testing gaps. And so I've been building a system for that called RoboRev.
It's dope.
And then I needed a system to like understand all of my agentic development. And so I built this system called Agents View, which is kind of like a, omnibus like session explorer plus session analyzer and insights. It's like analytics. Like I'm applying my like data analytics hat to my agentic development. Then I built an email system called Message Vault, which is like archiving and getting all my data off of Gmail so that I can have control of my own data destiny and analyze my personal information with local inference or whatever I want to do without like, I don't want to have to log into Google and like use their AI to analyze my email. I think that's BS. So anyway, so I've just kind of been like chipping away at one problem after another. I've got like at least 2 other projects that I haven't released that I'm working on that I think are interesting. And we'll talk about those today, but they're definitely, everything is in like the personal productivity space because I feel like things have gotten so like, I don't know if we're allowed to cuss on here, but
go for it.
Kind of as Cory Doctorow puts it, like in shitified. And so like I've been very tuned in to the platform decay, like especially how bad Gmail has gotten. Like I've been using Gmail for 20 years. And it frustrates me. Like every time I have to search for something in Gmail, I'm like, what the hell is this? Like what product manager, what engineers worked on this search feature? It's like, have you ever actually tried to find anything in your email and you thought that this search experience was acceptable?
It does
and
suck.
So like it like was frustrating me on a daily basis. And so, I started, it's basically like, the way I described it, I think I was on another podcast where it was like, the He-Man like grabbing the sword, by the power of Grayskull, I will solve this personal productivity nightmare. Like I will not have to suffer this platform decay of Gmail, like not being able to find things in my 20 years worth of email. Like don't show me emails that are unrelated from 6 months ago. I'm looking for something that I know exists 7 years ago with these exact words in it. Like it's not.
How are you exfiltrating your data off of Gmail?
You can set up it's a little bit tedious, but you can set up an OAuth app, which allows you to, subject to some quotas, to download your entire Gmail archive. You can also use Google Takeout, but Google Takeout actually that gives you like a full like bulk data export as like a tarball or a zip file. I've never actually used it, but
I have before.
It takes multiple days to get all your email, but turns out via using OAuth, you can get all your email out of Gmail, depending on the amount of email you have. Turns out I had like around 50 gigabytes worth of email and like 2 million individual emails. And so with Message Vault, for me, it takes like 12 hours to exfiltrate everything because there's rate limits. And then, it's something like even on, my 8 gigabit Google Fiber here in Nashville, I can only get like, I don't know, 100 emails per second out. And so you do the math and it takes about a half a day to get 2 million emails out of there. But what's been fun actually is that now that I have this local email archive, it's all like it's all like there's a SQLite system of record. I index it with DuckDB for all the queries and analytics. Sick. And I've just been going through and like just purging email out of my Gmail en masse. And so I intend to have like literal inbox zero, like no emails in Gmail. Like Message Vault will be like the system of record for my email, and there will be no email in Gmail. So I won't have to suffer their bad search experience because there will be nothing to search in Gmail, and that will fill me with joy.
It does suck quite bad.
Joy, but yeah, it's. Yeah. Anyway,
you're still going to keep your Gmail though, right? You're still going to keep the email?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I mean, I still will receive email there, but like periodically, maybe once a month, I'll do like
That's smart.
just set up a cron job to sync to message vault every day, and then do like a purge, and do like a purge once a month or
That's
whatever,
cool.
maybe once every 90 days, something like that. But yeah, anyway, it's kind of like a not an every person problem, but as somebody who like really cares about personal data sovereignty and like not having like all my personal information and data locked up in these cloud silos, like I think right now what's interesting is that everyone's reevaluating all their relationships with software as a service providers and trying
Yeah.
to see like, okay, like what SaaS products can we like, do we really need all these features, or can we vibe code a replacement? And I think there's some wrongheadedness here, and that people are vibe coding replacements for things that they really shouldn't. Like it's not a good use of their time, or they're getting themselves in for like a maintenance and support headache that, people are joking on LinkedIn, like, oh, I replaced, it's like I replaced this $20 a month SaaS service, and now I pay, I have an engineer that spends 20% of their time maintaining the vibe coded replacement. And so, it's just easier to pay. I remember when there was big news, I think, about Anthropic signing a big contract with Datadog, and everyone was like razzing them, like, what, you didn't just vibe code a replacement for Datadog? But turns out like monitoring applications at scale and just having software that works, it ties it a little bit into like, like an essay that I wrote recently called the Mythical Agent Month, which
That was a
is
great essay.
basically about like people underestimate how difficult it is to build software products. I think like Fred Brooks, like the author of the Mythical Man Month, he estimated that this was back in 1975, mind you, but he estimated that the difference in the amount of work it takes between working software and a software, like a viable software product, is around 9 times. And so people, and that's a big problem right now with vibe coding and agentic engineering, is that people are standing up new applications with Claude Code all the time. They see the working application, they're like, my gosh, like I have this new web application, this new iPhone app, or whatever. And then if you've never actually gone and built a full software product and supported it through its whole life cycle, there's like all this invisible labor that's associated with like making the software work over a long period of time. And you know, Claude Code and Codex and the coding agents are really good at building like the porcelain, like the kind of the shell. It's kind of this like Potemkin software.
Oh, that's a good way of putting
So
it.
it's like yeah, so it's very good at like coding agents, very good at building like the facade, like the Potemkin facade of the software. But when you actually go into like, okay, like there's all these, thorny issues associated with like making it robust, making it scalable, making it maintainable by somebody other than its author. It's like all these things that can go wrong when you're running a software product at scale. So anyway, yeah, I went from like existential dread a year ago to being like very stimulated and like very locked in. And so I kind of prefer the like being locked in, because being in a state of existential dread and feeling like my career is over was not very fun.
No.
And so now now I'm just like super locked in. Like I wake up at 5:30, 6 in the morning, and I'm just like locked in until I go to bed. I don't know how healthy that is, but like, I'm not burned out. It's like the opposite of burnout. So it's fun. I'm having fun.
Well, I remember you, me, and Nick Schrock and Matt Housley. We did a podcast a while ago. I think before all of us got hooked on Claude Code, and I think one of you described themselves as the AI boomer. And because I think Nick went through the same thing where he's kind of like, yeah, this stuff's okay, but whatever. And then fast forward to this time last year, Claude Code, all of a sudden you're like, huh, this stuff's actually pretty interesting. Because I felt the same way with GitHub Copilot. It's like, this thing is like, I just turned it off. I hate it. So I just, I'd rather use IntelliSense. But those days feel like 1890 right now. Like we've come quite a ways in just a 2-year period, and it's insane. Yeah, because I remember we were hanging out and you'd show me your phone, and you showed me your dashboard of all your cool stuff. And I was like, this, like, Wes is a madman. You just like have everything.
Oh yeah,
It's just like
yeah,
your imagination is the only thing that
yeah,
limits you at this point.
yeah. I've got like yeah. I think I showed you my private kind of personal command center. It's like where
Yeah, yeah,
like my personal to-do list, personalized to-do list system, personalized agenda. Like, why use
yeah.
Google Calendar when you can have your own personalized agenda that's exactly the way that you want?
It
And
was cool.
yeah, because then like I'm somebody that I hate sysadmin and I hate DevOps, and so I think partly what is I think partly what has created a creative burst for me is that I can build full stack applications now without having to get anybody's help. And it used to be that whenever I'd have to touch like, DevOps or CI/CD or sysadmin, things like that, like there's some people that just like they love their home lab and like fiddling with all the machines and doing the sysadmin and the networking and all that stuff. But that for me was always my kryptonite. And so I just would, whenever I would go to like work on something where I would touch like the infrastructure of the project, I would kind of shrivel up a little bit and be like, oh, like this is not the
Right.
way this is not enjoyable. Like this is, whenever I'd be like Googling on Stack Overflow and like looking up weird Linux stuff and be like, how do I do passwordless SSH? And then I know that there's like, this voice of the graybeard in my head being like, what, you didn't learn how to do sysadmin in college. Like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
But I'm 40 years old and I never learned how to do sysadmin. And so now the coding agents do all my sysadmin and they do all my DevOps and they do all my CI/CD. And so suddenly, like, basically the agents have filled in all these skill gaps that I had that I just underdeveloped and like things that didn't spark joy for me. And so now, like, I feel this empowerment where I can just focus on solving the problems that I think are interesting to me, and then lean on the agents to take care of the stuff that is not, I don't find to be interesting or enjoyable. Like I just set up, I'll just give you an example, right? So like agents view started out as a Go binary, which does syncing of agent sessions from JSON-L files. And then it has a web application, which allows you to browse those files and full text search. And there's an analytics dashboard and there's some other features in it. But the issue is that people are building all of these web applications where basically you run some program and it runs a web server on localhost, and then you connect to that application in Chrome or Safari or whatever over localhost. And it's just not like a great experience because you end up having like these random applications running in Chrome tabs. And whenever you want
Hmm.
to use them, you're like, I've got to hunt for the Chrome tab. And some people have like Chrome tab hoarding problems. And anyway, it was obvious that I should set up either an Electron or Tori, which is like an Electron alternative that's much more resource efficient and smaller footprint than Electron. But essentially, I should create a desktop application wrapper for Agents View. And this is the kind of thing that I would have never done myself. Like, there's no way that I would have ever sat down and done this before AI. But I could sit there on the couch in the evening watching a TV show and work with Claude and Codex to like build the Tori application, like run the Go binary as a sidecar in the Tori application, and then set up all of the CI/CD and like the Apple notarization stuff to create the Tori.app and the .dmg installer and make sure it's notarized because Mac OS makes you notarize your applications to protect Mac OS users from malware. And so there's like all these little tedious details where I'm sure, like, given enough time, I could look up on the internet how all this works, but it would have just like, in the past, it would have filled me with such like loathing and like, not fun vibes that I just would have avoided it and say like, I'm just not going to do that because it's not fun. But now, like, coding agents don't care whether it's fun or not. They'll just do it for you. And if it doesn't work the first time, they'll keep trying until it's done. And so now I've got notarized Tori wrapper for Agents View, and
That's insane.
it's wonderful.
In Go,
Yeah.
by the way, which is a language I think you wrote that you're probably not as proficient in as Python.
No, I've never written a line of Go in my life, and I don't see any reason to, honestly.
Yeah.
Like there's a company that I work with. I'm an investor in. It's a kind of a neo, I would describe it as a neo data engineering company called Bruin. They're based in Berlin, like really really smart folks. But they actually built this full stack data engineering platform, kind of an alternative to like, you can think of it as being like a more fully integrated alternative to using Airflow, DBT,
Sick.
Airbyte, like that kind of thing. It's kind of a little bit of all in one, but it's written in Go. And so in that sense, it's not tied to Python. Like obviously a lot of people want to use Python, but so they were using Go before it was cool. But now that like Go has become essentially the best language for agents, like they actually wrote a blog post like Go is the ultimate language for agents. I feel like I sort of stumbled on that. I hesitate to call. I think it's more of an opinion than a fact. I think there's good evidence to suggest that Go is like the best or one of the very best languages for agents. and we could talk more about why that is. But I feel like I stumbled a little bit on it after like doing a bunch of agentic engineering with Python and also using Rust. And both of these languages, I was like, neither of these feels quite right. Like something about this is wrong. Like in Python, the problem was that the development itself, like running the test suite and running the code, was too slow. I'm like, okay, Python slowness is a problem because I'm not writing the code. So I'm like, the whole reason to use Python is that it's easy to read and write. So
Right.
if I'm not reading or writing the code, what's the point here? Like I should just choose a language that compiles fast and runs fast, and that the agents are good at writing. And so I tried doing some stuff in Rust, and I've never written Rust either, and I put off learning Rust just long enough that I never have to learn it. So
It's pretty brutal,
I got
actually.
to the point where I was like being shamed by people. They're like, dude, like you haven't learned Rust yet? Like what's wrong with you? And so I was getting shamed by people. And then suddenly like, I'm like, I never have to learn Rust. But the problem with Rust is that Rust compiles pretty slowly. And so you can build debug binaries in Rust fairly quickly, but they don't run as fast. That's the trade-off. But optimized Rust binary builds, especially if you have a dependency stack, it could take many minutes to build. And so that's a problem when your agents may take 2 or 3 minutes to do something, and then they have to spend 3 minutes waiting for the project to build before they can run the tests. And so that's not awesome. But the reason I stumbled on Go is because I had people told me like how fast Go's execution was, but also how fast like the builds, like it has legendarily fast builds. And it's true that like Go projects will build in like, I don't know, under 10 seconds. It could be a big project, yeah, to have like build cycles that are like single digit seconds is definitely a game changer when agents need to be able to like tweak something, build and test. They tweak something, they build and test. And so when that's, you can compress that cycle down to like interacting with the code base, changing something, building and testing doesn't take very long. That means that the agents, their cycle times can get shorter and shorter, so you can get more work done with Claude Code or Codex or whatever
Right.
in the same amount of time. Of course, like you run into Go is not a perfect language for everything, but for like terminal utilities and like system utilities and web applications and web application backends, I should say, and things like that, it's a good fit. If I were doing AI or data science, like I wouldn't use Go. I would use Python.
Right.
But for most other like systems work, I think it's a pretty it's a general purpose engineering. It's like a pretty good language for that.
That's pretty cool. Like, what is your whole dev setup like?
Well, mostly up until about a week ago, it was mostly just terminals. Like I use Kitty terminal. I'm not yet on Ghosty. I'm working on it, but there was a minute where I was like, I knew I wanted a GPU accelerated terminal because the lagginess of like slower terminals, I find like the terminal that's embedded in VS Code to be a little bit, it's like Xterm.js. It's a little bit laggy. And
Yeah.
once you've used a GPU accelerated terminal like Ghosty or Kitty, it's kind of hard to go back to like a laggier,
Yeah, I'm
like
on
a not,
Ghosty. It's
yeah,
dope.
I use Ghosty. Yeah. But then back in, I think October, November, I used Ghosty and then it was crashing on me. Like I had a bunch of random crashes. And then I was like, that's not super cool. And then I used Kitty and and Kitty has never crashed once on me. So like I've had multiple like hard crashes, like lose my entire workspace with Ghosty. And
Ew.
I've never had that. I've never had that happen with Kitty. And so I generally have like kind of basically on my monitor, I have like 3 columns of terminals. So like one Kitty window, so like 3 Kitty windows, and then every Kitty window has a stack of terminals. So I do horizontal splits, and so I'll typically have like one or two Claude Code sessions per window, and then a terminal, so I can do random terminal commands. And then I will have a RoboRev queue, which is and then filtered down to the project that I'm working on. And so the RoboRev queue is where all my code reviews are running. So the idea is that my agents do stuff, they execute on plans, they generate commits. The commits get picked up by RoboRev and reviewed in the background. And so then the RoboRev queue is like my accountability system for making sure that all of the code that's generated gets looked at, and then I have to take the review and feed the review back into the appropriate agent session to make sure that the review feedback gets addressed. Because typically it's like finding bugs. Like sometimes it'll find like stuff that was generated like, oh, this isn't going to work on Windows, or this is going to break because of this edge case, stuff like that. Because when Claude or Codex are implementing, they're just focused on code generation. Like they don't like self-review and like scrutinize the code that they're generating for bugs. And so the default is that the code that comes out is very buggy, and the agents tend to believe that the code that's coming out is good, and they attest like, it's gotten better. I think like the sycophancy and the false confidence, like, Opus 4 was Sonnet 4 and Opus 4 would be like, this code is ready for production, and it would be full of bugs. You would just launch the application. It'd be like a blank screen or something like that. They've largely stopped doing that, but still like the code that's coming out is very buggy. So like so I'll work on, 2 or 3 projects simultaneously. I'll have multiple sessions per project. Sometimes like, all in the same branch or work tree. Sometimes I'll be working on different work trees in the same project if I'm working on 2 things at once within that project. And then the review queue for each project is what keeps me accountable, especially when I'm switching between projects. When I come back, if I've been spending 10 minutes looking at one thing, when I come back to the other project, like the agent is beeped. Like I have all my agents set up to like beep when they stop doing things. So I get a little ping,
Oh, that's cool.
ping, like it's time to check on the cake in the oven. And so I look, and then basically I see what the agent has done. Where it stopped, like what it says it's done. Sometimes it's Claude's like, oh, I left some stuff undone. Would you like me to do it? And I'm like, yes. I have all my agents configured to commit every turn. This is essential because you want every agent turn to generate a checkpoint. And this is kind of how the RoboRev code review system works, is that every time the agents commit, it fires a post-commit hook that triggers a code review. And then that code review goes into the review queue, which is kind of an inbox for code reviews. And then, basically I process the reviews in batches. It'll be like the last 3 turns generated these 3 reviews. I copy and paste all the findings into the agent session where those commits came from. And so its context is fresh. And so it's like, oh, yeah, I just worked on that. Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot to do that. I messed up that edge case. Like, oh yeah, that's a bug. Good catch on that. And so feeding the reviews into the same session where the code was generated yields like better more productive feedback. Because otherwise, if you start a fresh agent session and address the code review, there's a little bit of this like, memento, like, where was I? Like, what's this about? Oh, I see. Let me investigate the code base before I address the feedback. So like, addressing the feedback, and because the code review is getting done by a different agent. So it's an adversarial agent. It's not the same agent that did the implementation. Typically, it's not even the same model. So like I use Codex to review Claude's work. That's like my standard workflow. Anyway, yeah. So I work, multiple windows, tons of terminals. Typically, I've got like 6 or 8, Claude or Codex sessions visible on my screen, so I can like monitor all these different parallel agent sessions. A review queue for every project, which is kind of the accountability system to make sure all the code is getting reviewed. But that was true up until about a week ago, and I actually started using a new system called Superset. Not Apache Superset, mind you. It's Superset.sh. And so basically it's like, the way I would describe it is, if anyone's heard of Conductor, many people have probably heard of Conductor. It's like it's like a Claude Code and Codex application that manages Git work trees for you. Basically, it creates Git work trees and allows you to work on like a bunch of like parallel Claude Code or Codex sessions at the same time. So Superset is just like that, except unlike Conductor, it doesn't have an alternate UI for the Claude Code session itself. It's just terminals. And so the idea is that it's an Electron application where on the left, on the sidebar, just like Conductor, it has a list of your projects. So you can have multiple projects. And then for every project, the Git work trees that you have that are active. If some of those Git work trees have an upstream pull request, it'll show the pull request number and like the status, like whether the CI is passing on the pull request and stuff like that. But basically, you can switch between Git work trees really easily. And I like Superset more than Conductor because it's just terminals. So it's not like an alternate UI for Claude Code. It's just terminals. And so
looking at it right now, it looks pretty cool.
Yeah, it's already the way that I was working with Kitty, like manually, except it makes the Git work tree aspect a lot easier. And what's nice is that you can just like, if now I have got some new open source projects. And so if I receive a new pull request for a project that I'm working on in Superset, I can just create a new work tree that imports that pull request from GitHub. And then immediately I will have it reviewed with RoboRev, address the review feedback. If it seems fine, I'll push the review changes up to the PR. And then if the CI passes, I'll merge the pull request. And so I don't even have to interrupt what I was doing at the time. If a new pull request comes in, I just stand it up in Superset and fire up RoboRev to review it, make sure that's good. Often, like, contributors are not reviewing the code nearly as rigorously as I am. Like, I haven't done metrics, but I think pull requests that I'm doing now, I think they're getting reviewed somewhere between 10 and 20 times on average. So like, it's really like heavy duty code review. Like, I'm burning a lot of tokens this way, but it gives me much more confidence that I'm not shipping slop. Cause like, I've been, building mission critical production software that can't break for a lot of years. And so like, I treat bugs very seriously. And so like, I don't want to be people to start thinking of me as like, oh, Wes, he's vibe coding, he's using agents, and like he went from being like a legit programmer that makes high quality software to shipping a bunch of slop. And so I figure like, if I'm not reading the code, at least like the agent should be like, every line should get read 3 or 4 times by agents to make sure that it's good. Because given the non-determinism of these agents, like you could run the exact same prompt, the same review 5 times and get 5 different findings. And maybe 4 of them are valid and 1 of them is a false positive. But those 4 valid findings, I mean, that's to fix those issues before you ship is that's worth a lot. I think a lot of people are not doing this. They're just like, they get the output from Claude Code. Maybe they use like /review, like the review skill in Claude Code.
Right.
I guess Anthropic just released a new code review thing that's like, I don't know, $15 to $20 per code review. It sounds pretty expensive to me. My code reviews are not nearly that expensive. I'm running like 150 reviews per day. And so like, if I were using Anthropic's tool, that'd be like, I don't know, $3,000 a day. Like, I can't afford that. But
how many tokens does a review take with your system, with RoboRev?
I'm not measuring actually, but I'm running about 4 to 5,000 reviews a month at kind of my current rate of development. And I have a Codex subscription, a Claude Max subscription, and a Gemini subscription. And 3 $200 a month coding subs is enough to keep up with not only the development that I'm doing, but also the code reviews. So there's definitely times when I limit out, because Codex is my code review workhorse, and it is definitely the best code reviewer of the 3. Codex and Gemini are both better than Claude. Claude is the worst code reviewer, which is funny because sometimes I'll see people like singing Claude Code's praises as a code reviewer, and I'm like, have you used Codex to code review? Because it's a lot better. So I guess it's all relative.
Why do you think it's better?
It deliberates, it reasons a lot longer. And I actually I'm working on a blog post about this because I have, now that I've been in 2 months, like I've run on the order of 10,000 code reviews through the system. And I have data showing like how long each agent on average takes to code review. Claude kind of gives up around like 15 seconds of reasoning and then renders a judgment on average. And then both Codex and Gemini, their average review time is somewhere around like between 60 and 90 seconds. So they're just reasoning 4 to 6 times longer, so that they're going to find, and maybe there's some prompt engineering that I could do to like coax Claude into deliberating longer. But I think the reality is that I believe that Opus, the latest Opus models have been, I'm not an AI research expert by any means, but my sense is that Claude Code has been reinforcement learned to have faster cycle times, to give developers the feeling of forward momentum, like that they're making progress when they're using it. And so if you've ever talked to somebody that goes from using Claude Code to Codex, the Codex feels palpably slower, especially if you're running it on high or extra high reasoning. It feels palpably slower to use. And you can actually, even in agents view, like it will show you analytics on cycle times on the agents, like how long it takes the agent to perform a turn. Both Codex and Gemini have much longer cycle times than Claude. And so I think that Claude has just been calibrated to do work faster. which
Interesting.
means like faster means worse because it's doing less reasoning. And so, but it's doing that because it creates more engagement with the users. So they're kind of like engagement hacking. And that's partly why
Oh,
people
that's
love Claude
interesting.
Code so
Yeah.
much, because people feel like they're getting a lot done. But the reality is that like the code that's coming out of Claude Code is very buggy. It's good, like no doubt, and it's gotten a lot better, but it's very buggy code. Like I don't trust a line of code that comes out of any of these agents without it being like really, rigorously reviewed, especially by like other like multiple models.
Have you tried using Codex for the code generation as well?
I do, yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I'm running so many reviews, I typically, and the quality of the reviews that come out of Codex is so good. I try to save my tokens for code review, because
Mm-hmm.
if I use it for a bunch of implementation, then I just fully gas out my plan. And I've had this happen several times, like
Which plan are you on?
a $200 a month.
Okay.
Yeah. And so like I've like I think there were a couple of weeks like the limits. Gemini refreshes every 24 hours. Codex is once a week, just like Claude.
Mm,
One week I gassed out my Codex plan in 2 days.
nice.
And I had to go and buy another plan because I was like, I was like a drug addict. Like, I need the tokens.
It's
Sam,
5:30 in the morning. Let's go.
Sam, it's 5:30 in the morning. I need the tokens. Where are the tokens? So yeah, so it's but I have used Claude as like a surgical agent, like whenever, because sometimes Claude gets, if I'm working on something that's hard and Claude gets stumped, like definitely been times when Claude has gotten stumped, and I'll have Codex take a look and Codex will figure it out. So that's like,
Interesting.
obviously it's anecdotal, and there's probably been times when like Codex gets stumped and like Claude figures it out. But whenever like I can't get Claude to figure something out, it's like something really subtle, or like I'll have Codex take a look with extra high reasoning. And it doesn't always work, but sometimes, like I was working on something really thorny yesterday where I had all three agents like investigating a tricky bug, and eventually I figured it out. But like I had like three agents working on trying to figure something out for like 2 hours.
Interesting.
And so I had to burn like a ton of tokens like to debug what something that ended up being like a one line change. It was like one of those, I remember back in the caveman days where we used to like beat our head against the wall for like 3 days until we found like the one line change that
And
fixed the memory leak or like fixed the bug or something.
it's like a missing comma or something. You're just like
Yeah,
an
exactly.
idiot. So 5:30 in the morning. How long are you running these workflows for?
I guess you're asking like, what does my day look like? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, is it just a continuous, nonstop, just like churning out software and burning through
I mean,
tokens,
I'm still a
or
human. Like I need some sleep. Uh, my friend, like my friend from college on Twitter was like joking about like there's some tweet about like people using coding agents like doing polyphasic sleep, like waking up in the middle of the night to like check on their agents. I have gotten up in the middle of the night to check on, because sometimes I'll set them to work, doing some refactoring that might take like autonomous refactoring that might take like 4 or 6 hours. That's all with RoboRev. There's like a kind of an autonomous fix mode, so you can queue up you can be like analyze all these files and then like fix them one by one, and that could take like 6 hours. That's how I'm not using Gastown or one of these orchestrators or anything. I'm not
right?
crazy. Mostly I'm sleeping during the night. Like I'll sleep from like 11 to 5:30 or 6 in the morning, which is like probably not enough sleep. I don't know, I'm getting older. I'm more tired than I used to be. But typically, like, I'll start working in the morning. I'll make coffee. At some point, I'll work out. Like, I have a Peloton, but I like bought like this is maybe too much information, but like I bought like one of these like plastic tablet holders, and it turns out that I can like just sit my MacBook Air on the Peloton, and so I can like keep an eye, so I can like work out. I can like work out for an hour on the exercise bike, and like keep an eye on my sessions and like press OK and like do stuff like that. And if something goes wrong, I can like intervene a little bit. I found like setting down the laptop like next to I do yoga, and so like I'll set down like the laptop like while I'm doing yoga, and so like I'm like in the middle of a pose, and I'm not making this up. This is like these are actual facts here. So
God,
I'll watch the screen while this is going. I typically take a break to like I take a break to eat, and I do lift at the gym, and so like I don't take my laptop to the gym, but
but if you
I'll
could,
like try to set like the workflow is like I try to set the agents, get the agents busy with something like while I go to the gym or something, so like they can do something productive when I'm away. Some people are like, managing their agents through their phone. I'm not there yet. I think maybe it's like people are telling me like, oh, in a month or two, or maybe like 3 months, you're going to be like, talking to your agents over voice, like on your phone. Like
You could probably set
I'm
up an
not there yet.
OpenClaw setup for that,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
Like, just have it run everything at your house.
Yeah. No, it's yeah. Well, yeah. OpenClaw I haven't set up yet. I have a Mac Mini. Like I bought a Mac Mini, but I've been like kind of like I'm not
I
quite
set
there
it up
yet.
on DigitalOcean, and then I'm like, okay, this is great, except I'm not going to give it any personal information. The use case is pretty limited. You know what I mean? I mean, passwords, credit cards. I don't think I'm there yet. So,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
I'm not coding with voice. I did buy like a little C-shaped like sofa table so that I can like, put the laptop like
mm,
so if I'm like watching TV at night and like I play video games and so like, I well the one thing that made me put down my laptop and play and like focus on a video game was like the new Resident Evil. So that was like the one thing where I was like, okay, like I just like set down the laptop. I'm like this it only took like 10 hours to get through, so like this deserves my full undivided attention. But
go
if I'm
play
playing
that.
something that doesn't require as much attention, then I just like, I got the like the C-shaped table, and so I just like set the laptop there. If it's like in the evening, like I can't sit at a desk and stare at a computer monitor until late in
Right.
the evening. Like I have to be like. But what I think is cool about one of the things that's cool about coding agents now is that it you can transform periods of divided or scattered attention into productive time. Like you can, if you're on a Zoom call where you're not actively talking, you're listening, you can keep an eye on an agent session so you can keep being productive during meetings. And like that's, pretty cool. Obviously, like you still want to pay attention to the meeting, but like it doesn't take that much energy to babysit an agent session. Like you just kind of have to like keep an eye on it. And sometimes like Claude will stop and will ask a question like, "Oh, I fixed this. Like, would you like me to fix this other thing?" And you're like, "Yes." That's all you have to do is say yes. But and so it's that's been fun. Like feeling like like downtime could turn into productive time, but without it being tiring. Because like when I was in my 20s, I used to especially when I was really deep, like in deep working on pandas, like I would work long days and work into the evenings, and to the detriment of my personal relationships, and like I wasn't seeing friends, and it was like bad for my personal life.
So you're
Like
working as a quant too, right? So while you're doing
yeah,
pandas,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And so I was like, when I had my quant job at AQR doing pandas, like I would work all day, and then I would work in the evening on pandas and work on weekends. And it was like, because I have maybe nobody can tell, but I have an obsessive personality,
no shit.
and it wasn't, yeah, it wasn't the best. But now, like it's yeah, it sounds like it's become an all-consuming activity. I think that I will reach some kind of new equilibrium, like not quite as intense as what I'm doing right now. Like I feel like right now there's just a bunch of these. Like I realized that I had itches that had been remained unscratched for many
Right.
years, like these problems that I had been thinking about, like wouldn't it be great if like I could solve this problem if I had the time. So I have this backlog, this mental backlog of all these projects and this wish list of things that I always wanted to do. And so I'm building some of those things, but then like I'm also building software to make it more pleasant to use agents, like the code review problem, because people are like already complaining about how many pull requests are stacking up on GitHub and how hard it is to review all of them. And so my response to this is, well, we have to build a system to do code review at scale and like have agents do the code review. And when you want to build the code review system such that when the agents say, if you have like every time I push to GitHub, there are three code reviews that happen on every push. So there's two. So both Codex and Gemini take a hard look at the branch, looking for holistically for bugs and regressions and problems. And then I also run a dedicated security review with Codex, just looking for security problems, because I'm worried about prompt injections. I'm worried about being attacked by random vibe coded, hackers making, sly contributions to my projects. And
Right.
so, and probably like there's still, I do look through the code that I'm receiving from other people. Like I don't read my own code that carefully, but I know it's like my prompts and my agents built it. But if I receive an external pull request, like I do look through the contributor's code and like, make sure that like I glance through it and that I have agents review it pretty rigorously. But anyway, yeah, like so yes, like I'm solving problems that building things that I've wanted to build for years, like solving, email archive and search and analytics is something that I've wanted to do for a long time. And so that fills me with a lot of satisfaction to do that. But then, just using bare Claude Code sessions and terminals, it's just not like, it was obvious that it just was not the best way to work. And so we need like tools to provide supervision and guardrails and like, automated code review and like the ability to like, go back and retroactively analyze like your sessions, like being able to analyze your Claude Code sessions and have agents make suggestions about how to improve your agents.md or claude.md is really useful, turns out. And so, but all that data like lives in random config directories on your hard drive. And
Yeah.
if you don't change a configuration flag, like Claude will delete old sessions after 30 days. So you actually have to change a setting to get it to retain the data for more than 30 days. A lot of people don't know that.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that either.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm having fun. Like I feel like it's a very stimulating, interesting time to be alive. Like
Yeah.
feels like the early internet, maybe more interesting than the early internet. But I was only 10 years old in 1995 when I first got the internet. Maybe it was 94 or 95, something in that era. But I was just too young to do anything. I was too young to do a startup and too immature to do anything.
I was around then. I'm actually looking at a stack of old Wired magazines from the early '90s that I had as a kid, and yeah, I actually beta tested Mosaic as a teenager, which is kind of interesting. But it feels like the vibe now, I would say, is it's a lot more democratized. People were able to search and do emails to like the two people who had emails. That was about it. Now, I think everyone has the ability to build whatever they want. So it feels like whatever the internet was, this is about 1,000 orders of magnitude bigger. I think it's cool. It's really cool to see.
Yeah. Well, I think what I think a lot about it, and I'm curious your thoughts on, is there was a lot of discussion last year about like the death of software engineering and like the death of the software engineer and there just not being enough programming jobs. But I think there's going to be at least the same amount of programming jobs, but just a lot more software being built and like a lot more software for like software that never, a lot more companies building their own, internal software projects. Like my brother who doesn't have a software engineering background is building software with Claude, for
So cool.
automate parts of his job. And it's like, it's tremendous, like what's happening. But extrapolating, like, I don't know how many years from now, like 2 years from now, 5 years from now, and we're in a world where like, I feel like we're going to end up becoming like software hoarders, where like everyone is going to have their like personal collection of like 40 or 50 like vibe coded software projects that they've built. And like some people will build personal systems to like manage their vibe coded software and like integrate it together and refactor it and renovate it and stuff like that. But I feel like a lot of people, like whenever you talk to them about their personal stack, like I even like, I'm even self-conscious about showing my own kind of unreleased personal software to people, because I feel like some of it might make me look a little bit crazy. They're like, "Oh, you actually use this? Like this seems like really scattered and disorganized." But like I have it all. I can keep it all straight in my head, and like I have I've got some repositories which like kind of are the repositories that manage like my collection of personal software that I built for myself. But extrapolating from here, like, if I have like 10 or 15 little utilities or personal applications, and everybody has, 10 or 15 or 50 utilities. And so like just the number of software projects that exist is going to be 100 times what it is now, or I don't know what the factor is going to be. And so
it reminds me a lot. So back in, I would say 94 or something, you could get a phone book about this size, and this would actually be the web pages. This was the internet. So you can get a paper directory of websites back then. And I feel like, to use that example, that phone book is pretty much the number of applications that we currently have today and that we've had up to now. Right. It was a lot of friction to get there, but now I feel like what's going to happen is what happened with the web, where I don't even know how many web pages there are now. It's countless. It's and so, but that explosion of the ability to create HTML, for example, and link it together, I think you're going to see a lot of similarities with the number of apps and software that's being built, where it can't be constrained to a phone book anymore, right? Like Matt Turk's Mad Data Landscape, for example, right? Like all those are companies which now have to.
You need a microscope,
Oh yeah,
like they're probably half of them are AI companies now, right?
oh, they're all AI, but when you look at them too, you're like, okay, so like how much of this, how many of these companies could, if in a week, could you vibe code? At least the main solution set, right? And probably quite a few, actually. When I talk to vendors right now, they're like, yeah, I don't know what our future is because we're basically a feature. And so that's sort of the question. But then that landscape, it blows up into something you probably need the James Webb Telescope to look at now, because there's just going to be so many applications. But are these commercialized? Probably not, but that's not the point. Just like the web, you kind of got out of the walled gardens of the AOLs and CompuServes or whatever, and into just the web. And I think that to me is, you're going to see an explosion of software. Even during my Discord group today, our chat, like I made like 2 apps, just really crass fart video games. But the whole point was like, because people are like, oh, what's a commercialization of the skills marketplace? And it's like, there isn't. It's like with the fart apps that used to have on the iOS, like Apple when it first came out, the iPhone. It's like, you could spend $1 on those. It's like that quickly went away. Nobody's going to do that anymore. And now within like 2 minutes, they just made the app. And I'm like,
yeah,
okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, like the whole concept of defensibility, I feel like software defensibility and moats has been, like MOATS, has been turned on its head, because if there's a piece of software that I was using, and I'm not going to say what piece of software it was, but it there was something I was using, and it frustrated me. And in the past, like, I would have suffered that frustration because the barrier to building something better, building a replacement, was like so high. Like it would take a year to build. And I'm indulging in these like perverse thoughts. I'm like looking at this project. I'm like, how hard can this be? I've gone down a couple of those rabbit holes, and yeah, like there's a lot of these pieces of software that we use they're more complex than they appear on the surface, or
Exactly.
they've solved internal, architectural, data storage, data management problems, scalability problems, performance problems that many people just don't even realize they're there. And so like many software projects, you're looking at, like, to use the iceberg analogy, like you see the porcelain, kind of the iceberg is, this part of the application that you interact with, and it seems simple and it doesn't seem that difficult. But then, you rarely contemplate or exposed to especially for closed source software, like you're rarely exposed to the internals of like how that system actually works and like what type of complexity lives inside. So, now, like whenever I look at any software project, like the first thing I'm interested in is like, how many lines of code is there? When I talk to like people, I've had a lot of, because I'm an investor now, part-time, and people will reach out to me about I'm getting bombarded with tons of people pitching me new projects that have been created in the last 6 months. Brand new software projects, entirely built with Claude Code or whatever agent, usually Claude Code. And the first question I have is like, how many lines of code? Because lines of code is like a rough complexity metric of like how difficult is it to build this, like how difficult something is to build with agents. It becomes like, yeah, because it's not like how hard is it for humans to build. Now it's like coding is essentially free. And so now like what you're interested in is like, how difficult is it for a human to know what they need to prompt to build this and to be able to like create the right agentic loop, and like essentially like what type of knowledge do you need to have, like taste and design, and the right background that you need to have the ability to write the prompts to generate this piece of software. And so that essentially has become the new form of defensibility, so that if you don't have the right type of software engineering background, design taste, and experience to be able to conceptualize like what the software needs to do, because the agents will propose like very like Potemkin software, like these high
Yeah.
level generic like cookie cutter architectures and plans for things, and that will get you to like a hello world, like a basic version of the software. But once you need to go, like the way I described it in the Mythical Agent Month blog post was like the guy called the Brownfield Barrier. It's like how big is the
Yeah.
project? How big does the project get before the agents start to struggle? And where it's like you have to be able to engage in a serious way with the code base and the software architecture to be able to provide, like the bigger the software is, the more important your prompts are and your ability to like proactively ask the agents to refactor and restructure the software to become more scalable. And I've talked with some people. I have a few projects now that are around 100,000 lines of code that are entirely built with agents. And I can tell that like somewhere beyond at like around the 100,000 line mark and beyond is like the agents really begin to like have a more difficult time, like
Interesting.
going from 0 to 50,000 lines of code, easy. You can stand up a new project 2 or 3 days, have a 50,000 line code base if you know what you want to build. 50 to 100,000. But the complexity, like the difficulty for getting the agents to effectively navigate the code base and do what you want them to do, I don't know whether it's like it's scaling quadratically or exponentially, but it feels like at minimum a quadratic growth in like the efficiency of the agents working in that project. And we've seen that because we've been using agents to work on Positron, which is a fork of VS Code. And VS Code has well over 1 million lines of code. And it is much harder for agents to work on 1 million line code base than it is 100,000 line code base, because you essentially like have to give them like a treasure map, the equivalent of a treasure map, so that they know where to find things. Because otherwise, like just think about like trying to navigate 1 million lines of code and figure out like to find the needle in the haystack, like how much code you have to grab and like how much semantic search and fuzzy search you have to do on the code base to find things of interest. And so essentially you have to create auxiliary systems for your agents to interact with, to like essentially create the equivalent of horse blinders, where you say like, if you're working on this part of the system, like look here, like look only here, do not touch any other part of the code base, like stay in your lane basically. And I've talked to some people that think that we may need to create like structured, so essentially like a form of like hard sandboxing, like you allow the agent to see the whole code base, but you limit like what they're allowed to modify. Because if you allow them just like free reign, it's like you can read the whole code base, but like you can only touch like this slice of 50,000 lines or 100,000 lines, or whatever. But yeah, it's an interesting problem. I mean, I think it's
Yeah.
clear that like these small projects that you can build in an afternoon or in an evening, people are getting a lot of big dopamine hits building new
Mhm.
things from scratch with Claude Code. But what that software looks like at scale and over a long period of time, like I think remains to be seen. And actually not an AGI bull. Like I don't buy the AGI hype at all. And I do think that people are overestimating like agents' ability to take over the work of principal level engineers who are like software architects who build and
Yeah.
maintain big software systems. Because I think we've seen that agents are just really good at the small stuff, like small scale systems. But like I'm not hearing a lot of like people talking about agents really crushing it on 1 million line code bases. And so I think part of the next like 5 years is maybe the agents will keep getting better and they'll just figure out some magic software engineering harness to make that tractable. But there's a lot of smart people working on it, so I'm sure we'll figure it out. And
Yeah.
I need to solve that problem too, because I like building big software. So at minimum, I'll try to build something that works for me.
That's awesome. Wes, it's always good chatting with you. To do it again sometime. Yeah, like I said, it's inspiring seeing what you're
Lot
doing.
of stuff on my mind. Yeah. So
Yeah, yeah,
I'll keep
apparently.
cranking.
It's great. Yeah, and I'm loving your posts too. It just feels like you just hit like this new stride recently where it's just like Wes McKinney 2 or 3.0 all of a sudden. And it's just
Yeah, I was on like not exactly a hiatus, but like I was working on a startup for 5 years, and yeah, like COVID happened, and yeah, just like things, like I wasn't super active developing, since 2020. And so like to get back, get back into my stride and back into like, like kind of the project creation motion definitely feels really good. And
Yeah.
but to be able to do it with agents and without nearly so much of the drudgery as before is also like kind of definitely a breath of fresh air, because I feel like software engineering could become like a little bit tedious and like not fun. And so like this, all of a sudden it feels fun again. And so that's like part of the reason I really liked Python in the early days was like, it gave you this feeling of being able to just do things like, oh, I can
Hmm.
sit down and write some code and get things done. And,
Build a
as time went
spreadsheet called
on,
Pandas. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and as time went on, I think, not to like, not to rag on Python, but like, Python became a little bit like Java-ified, if that makes sense. Like it developed a lot of like, development process, and it got types and like all this like, development infrastructure, which is all there for good reason. But I feel like it made Python a better language for large teams and for software engineering at scale, but it also took away some of the pure joy of being able to sit down and just write some Python code and make it go. And that was what really attracted me to the language in the first place. And when things became a lot more, structured and bureaucratic, so to speak, I feel like it was good for the community, because Python had to become this enterprise software language that businesses could use and that you could use to build big software projects, because people are building stuff in Python now that they would have built in Java 20 years ago. So like, I think obviously like we can't build the software of today the way that we built, small projects in Python 20 years ago. But yeah, I think that the feeling I get now is like that same kind of that same joy of productivity that I felt like in the early days of, Python circa
That's
2008,
so cool.
2009.
Well, I can tell you're just having fun with it too. I think that's
Yeah, of
it keeps you
course.
going. It's awesome to see. Yeah, you're on a rampage, dude. I just keep it up.
I'll do my
It's
best.
awesome.
Yeah,
Yes,
try to get some sleep.
or don't. Whatever. It's
Yeah,
overrated. So
yeah.
awesome. Well, till next time, man. It's good
All
to
right.
see you. Later.
Thanks, Joe.